Sam Wilson and Miles Morales have a lot in common. Both of them took on the mantle of an iconic Marvel character who wore red and blue after the original hero died or retired. Both represent the same values as the original hero and stand for the same ideals, but their personalities and origin stories are different. And both became very popular between 2015 and 2019 during the all-new, all-different era. But Miles is loved by fans, had 2 hugely successful movies, and starred in his own video game, while Sam still isn't accepted as Captain America, not even after getting his own show and movie. Even though Sam is well written and Anthony Mackie does a great job playing the character, many MCU fans still see him as Falcon, not as Captain America. They're waiting for Chris Evans to return in Secret Wars to take up the shield again. But why is one accepted and the other not? The way each character was introduced was very different. Sam has a much longer history since he debuted in the late 60s, 42 years before Miles. But in almost all of his appearances, he was a supporting character, the sidekick to the original Captain America. He debuted in a Steve Rogers comic, had his origin story told in Steve's regular series, and Steve was the one who gave him the name Falcon. During the 70s, Sam joined Steve on his adventures in New York, and Marvel even changed the title of the regular series to Captain America and Falcon for almost 100 issues. Sam was a well-written character. His costume looked great, and he even got powers thanks to the Cosmic Cube. He was able to communicate with birds, which was omitted in the MCU. But everyone still saw him as Cap's sidekick, not as an independent hero. Sam didn't get his own comic until 1993, and it only lasted 4 issues. People wanted to see him with Captain America, not alone, and even less as Captain America himself. It's true that Sam wielded the shield in one issue of Sentinel of Liberty in the 90s when Steve was out of action, but that was just a one-time thing. Sidekicks are never promoted to main heroes, at least not permanently. If you don't believe me, listen to this. Sam's most well-known time as Cap was in 2014, when he got his own regular series after Steve passed the mantle to him because he had aged and lost his powers. Pretty similar to what happened in the MCU. But just 12 issues later, Marvel rejuvenated Steve using the Cosmic Cube and put him into Sam's comics because people wanted to see Steve as Captain America. Just 1 year later, Sam stepped down and Steve became Cap again, until Hydra brainwashed Steve during Secret Empire. With the original Cap turned into a villain, Sam reluctantly took up the shield again, but he stepped down for the second time when everything went back to normal. Finally, in 2022, he became Cap again, now alongside Steve. In symbol of truth, both were Captain America. But Sam was always a temporary replacement. People knew that the original Captain America would come back sooner or later, so they never fully accepted Sam wielding the shield, because it was obvious he would go back to being a sidekick. The same thing happens in the MCU. Ever since they announced Secret Wars, we've all been theorizing that Marvel is going to do a soft reboot, just like in the comics, rearranging things for the next saga. They'll probably recast Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, so they can bring back Iron Man and the original Captain America, but played by younger actors. That means Sam's days as Captain America are numbered. Maybe Anthony Mackie will keep playing the character, but he'll go back to being Falcon. He'll go back to being a sidekick. But that doesn't happen with Miles. In the comics and in every single adaptation, Miles has been an independent superhero from the start. He made a brief cameo in Ultimate Fallout number 4, which was the epilogue to the death of Peter Parker from Universe 1610. But after that, he had his own regular series, where he was the absolute protagonist from beginning to end. He still has his own comics to this day, and I know what you're thinking. That Miles's origin story is very similar to Peter's. He was also bitten by a spider, has powers similar to Peter's, struggles to balance his superhero life with his personal life, and on top of that, he was inspired by the original Spider-Man to become a hero. But the difference with Sam Wilson is that he was never a sidekick. He was never called Spider-Boy or Spider-Man Jr., nor did he tag along with an established hero for decades. The closest thing to that was a 2011 crossover, where Miles crossed paths with 616 Peter Parker. That was mainly a marketing move to sell more comics. After that, Miles went back to being an independent hero in his own universe. Sony did the same thing with Into the Spider-Verse, where Miles briefly meets the Peter Parker from his universe and becomes Spider-Man after his death. He gets help from a more experienced Spider-Man from another universe. But even though Peter B. Parker guides him, he's always a full-fledged hero, not the assistant to the real Spider-Man. Unlike Sam, he wasn't a sidekick who was promoted to a full-time hero decades later. He was always a hero. This is key. Marvel is committed to making Miles an independent hero, so no one is expecting him to step down for Peter to replace him. No one reads his comics thinking Miles might stop being Spider-Man at any moment, and no one went to see Across the Spider-Verse expecting Miles to be replaced by another Spider-Man at the end of the movie. While Sam only becomes Cap when Steve isn't available, Miles is always Spider-Man. That's why he can have adventures in different universes than the original Peter Parker, but he can also team up with Peter. That's what he's doing right now in The Spectacular Spider-Man, which is amazing. But let's not fool ourselves. No one would have accepted accepted Miles so easily if he hadn't come from another universe. If you were paying attention, you'll have noticed that Miles didn't debut in Marvel's main continuity, but in Universe 1610, better known as the Ultimate Universe. This was an alternate universe that Marvel created in the 2000s to tell all their stories from scratch, with new creative teams reinventing the most important characters of the publisher. Since they didn't have to worry about maintaining the extensive canon of Universe 616, they had a lot of creative freedom. They were able to kill Peter Parker, turn Reed Richards into a villain, and make Wanda and Quicksilver do yummy stuff. But since Marvel's editors weren't stupid, they decided to keep all the publications from Universe 616. For several years, there were two different Marvel continuities, two separate universes that you could enjoy independently. So if you didn't like Miles Morales and wanted to keep reading Peter's adventures, you could, because Peter was still alive in Universe 616. Your favorite hero hadn't been replaced by a completely new character, but it took a while for people to accept Miles. Brian Michael Bendis, the creator of Miles Morales, received all kinds of attacks after Miles debuted. Attacks that came from a very extreme group that couldn't accept someone else wearing the Spider-Man mask. But over the years, Miles became a solid character in Universe 1610, and Marvel decided to bring him into Universe 616 so he could share a universe with the original Peter Parker. Both could be Spider-Man at the same time without issues, because one wasn't replacing the other. Right now, you can read Amazing Spider-Man with Peter as the main character, and if you want to see Miles' adventures, you've got Miles Morales Spider-Man. The same thing happens in the movies. If you prefer Peter, you have Tom Holland in the MCU, and you'll probably see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield again in Secret Wars. And if you prefer Miles, you have the animated Spider-Verse movies, which are amazing. It's only a matter of time before Marvel does the same thing on Disney+, adding an animated series for Miles, so you can choose to watch Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man starring Peter, or Miles Morales' adventures.
I would like to see that.
Maybe in a few decades when Miles has more fans, people will accept him as the main Spider-Man. Today, there are already people who prefer him over Peter Parker, thanks to Spider-Verse, especially the younger audience. When Tom Holland eventually quits being Spider-Man in the MCU, they could have Miles take his place. And I'm sure fans would accept him more easily than they did Sam as Captain America. But for now, it's not necessary, because both Spider-Men can coexist. Sam's situation was very different. Sam Wilson was born and became Cap in Marvel's main continuity, both in the comics and in the movies. If you like Steve more, well, too bad, because there was no way to keep seeing the original Captain America in action. Steve hasn't appeared since Endgame in the MCU, and even if he came back, he'd be a walking fossil. He could have a similar role to the one he had at the beginning of All New, All Different, being Sam's guy in the chair, but it wouldn't be the same as in the Infinity Saga, because Chris Evans wouldn't be Captain America anymore. And it doesn't seem like Marvel has any plans to make a prequel showing how Steve returned the Infinity Stones, something a lot of fans want to see. A show telling that story would have had great numbers on Disney+, and it would have let people decide who their Captain America is, just like what happened with Peter and Miles in the comics.
Why didn't I think of that?
Kevin Feige probably made this decision because he tried to do the same thing as in the comics, establish Cap as a unique hero who can't have different versions in the same universe. So Sam can only take Steve's place if Steve retires or is no longer available. And if we want to see Steve as Cap again, Sam has to step down. I also wouldn't be surprised if Feige didn't want two versions of Cap competing, because their fans would have been fighting nonstop on social media, even though that strategy worked really well to establish Miles. The problem is that by doing it this way, Sam constantly has to justify why he's Captain America. The goal of Falcon and the Winter Soldier was to convince people that Sam could be a worthy successor to Steve. But in the first episode, Sam gives up the shield and says he'd rather stay Falcon because he'll never live up to Steve. He says he doesn't deserve to be Captain America, and he only puts on the suit in the last episode. This makes us miss Steve even more and compare Sam to the original Cap, because he himself is doing it. The show is inviting us to compare them, and Sam is always going to lose that comparison. He's not the original, and Steve was Cap for much longer. In Brave New World, General Ross even tells him straight to his face that he's not Steve Rogers.
You may be Captain America, but you're not Steve Rogers. You're right. I'm not.
Before you get all mad at me, I'm not blind. I get what they were trying to do with Sam's arc, showing how he struggles with the pressure of being Cap. It would be way easier for him to go back to being a sidekick or to work alone, but in the end, he's going to accept that he deserves to lead the Avengers, and will bring them together in Doomsday. It was a little different in the comics. Sam put on the suit 5 minutes after Steve chose him as his successor, and didn't hesitate to shout, "Avengers Assemble." But during his solo series, he faced the same problems as in the MCU, becoming the face of a divided country that that expects him to be something he neither wants nor can be. But just like I can understand that, I also understand why a lot of people got tired of Sam's whining and why they'd rather see Steve back, since he was proud to be Captain America. With Miles, none of this happens. He didn't need a whole show to justify why he should be Spider-Man and why people should accept him. He was introduced as Spider-Man, and that was it. In the first few issues of his comics, some people see him as a cheap knockoff, and they notice that he doesn't have the same experience as the previous Spider-Man. Some think he looks too young, like he's just a kid, but Miles never gives up the mantle because he feels too much pressure. Well, technically he gave up the mantle during a few issues, but for completely different reasons. He doesn't spend issue after issue wondering if he should be Spider-Man or if he should pick a different name and a different suit, so people wouldn't compare him to Peter. He's Spider-Man, and that's that. There's no debate.
Is that clear?
In the final scene of Into the Spider-Verse, Miles says anyone can wear the mask, anyone can be a hero, and therefore anyone can be Spider-Man. That's why there are thousands of Spider-Man variants across the multiverse, and many of them aren't even Peter Parker, but completely different people. And in Across the Spider-Verse, Miguel tells Miles that he was never supposed to be Spider-Man because that wasn't his destiny. The spider that bit him came from another universe and wasn't supposed to give him powers. But Miles never hesitates to use the Spidey name. He knows he deserves to be Spider-Man, period. Here's the key difference. No matter what problems he faces, Miles is proud to be Spider-Man. Sam feels restricted and pressured by the mantle of Captain America. In Brave New World, he disobeys the president's orders to do what's right because his values are above those of any government or even what his country represents, but he doesn't feel comfortable doing so. They tell us the same thing in Symbol of Truth, where Sam says he wants to be a global hero, to represent and help the entire world, not just the United States. And to do that, maybe he shouldn't be Captain America. Even Anthony Mackie himself said he's proud to be American. But his character doesn't just represent the US because his values are universal. The message Marvel is trying to send is interesting, but it's clear that Sam would feel more comfortable without the Captain America mantle. Therefore, some people will never accept him as Cap, because he doesn't accept it either. Miles, on the other hand, is perfect as Spider-Man. And just imagine how much better Miles would be if Marvel got the Spider-Man rights back. We talk about that in this video over here.
What has two thumbs and doesn't give a crap?